It's rain-wet streets, it's nights like this with fog rolling in, cars, faceless people going by doing the things that they're doing. There's something kind of hypnotic about it. That's when I get inspired to carry what these streets are like, what the city is like, the mysteries, the stories, the thousands and thousands of people that you pass that are going by as shadows in this wet, cold, dangerous environment. I wanted to grab that. I wanted to take it into the future, and where I took it was Cyberpunk.
Cyberpunk 2077 is a huge game, and while it faced one of the worst release dates ever, it has since become something that many people, myself included, really enjoy. There are many reasons for this, but chief among them is the lore of the game world, which is surprisingly vast and, as you will see in today's video, mostly not of the cheerful variety. Today we will be breaking down every layer of the Cyberpunk 2077 Iceberg. The Iceberg I will be using for this video was created by ThriftyGeo69 on Reddit and posted on r/low-sodium-cyberpunk. I have rewritten a lot of the material they provided to work in a video format and updated some with as much recent information as possible. A good amount, though, has been pulled directly from the source. Oh, and in case it wasn't clear, there's going to be a lot of spoilers, so if you haven't finished the story and want to discover some things on your own, maybe sit this one out. Throughout this video, I will be referring to V as female, since that is what she was for my playthrough, and it'll make some of the wording less convoluted. That said, we are now going to start with Tier 1 of the Cyberpunk Iceberg, Megabuilding H10. Megabuilding H10 is common knowledge and facts that anyone can pick up by just playing the game and reading some item descriptions. At the top of Tier 1, we have Mr. Blue Eyes. In a side mission called Dream On, V is asked to investigate some strange occurrences in the home of Jefferson and Elizabeth Perales. The couple is being surveilled and manipulated by dark forces higher up in Night City. Elizabeth reveals that she is already aware of the manipulation and asks V to not tell Jefferson because she knows that if Jefferson finds out what is happening, he will attempt to uproot the truth, and that will almost certainly lead to his demise. She wants to preserve their life as it is, even if it's built on lies. At the end of the mission, V is warned not to pursue the story further by what seems to be a rogue AI and can see Mr. Blue Eyes watching from a distance. He seems to be an agent of an even higher level of aristocracy, or maybe even the one responsible for the manipulation. There are more theories about Mr. Blue Eyes, but we'll get to those further down the iceberg. Next, we have Morgan Blackhand. He was a mercenary in Night City who was heavily involved in the Fourth Corporate War and worked with Johnny Silverhand. He was a major character in the Cyberpunk tabletop game and usually referenced as one of, if not the greatest solo mercenary in Northern California. While he and Johnny had mutual interests and beliefs, Morgan was much more of a professional soldier and less of a rebel. He was a part of the 2023 attack on Arasaka Tower and led Strike Team Omega, which would act as support should Johnny's Strike Team Alpha fail in their mission. He was last seen on the roof of the tower by Strike Team Alpha as they boarded an Aerodyne to make their escape, and was there confronted by Atom Smasher. After that, he was never seen again. Some people think he went into hiding, and some think he became a government operative, but more than likely, he did not survive the confrontation with Atom Smasher or the following nuclear detonation. However, Mike Ponsmith confirmed that Morgan was still alive in 2045, so maybe not. At least his digital self survived in one form or another. He is also such an important character to Mike that he didn't even want Morgan Blackhand to appear in Cyberpunk 2077. A fact tied oddly enough to Mr. Blue Eyes, which we will return to much later. Various Connections to The Witcher is about the many references that connect the worlds of the Witcher series with Cyberpunk. The first of these is Ciri's dialogue in The Witcher 3, in which she describes traveling to a futuristic city where people used flying ships and had metal in their heads. If players choose to take the Corpo lifestyle route, they will be able to explore V's office, where there's a magazine called Retro Gaming with an image of Ciri and the Witcher 3 Wild Hunt logo. In the Coastview area of Night City, you can find the Smuggler's Cache with a note stating thousands of caches and stashes all marked with that tantalizing question mark. Clearly a reference to the mini caches like this found in The Witcher 3. In one of the playable arcade cabinets in Night City, there's a game called Roach Race, which is a side-scrolling horse racing game in which you play as Geralt's horse, Roach. There's an NPC that plays Blood and Wine, which is the theme from a Witcher 3 expansion of the same name. In one of the endings, V wakes up in a crashed car and sees that a barn swallow has landed on the broken window, which is odd because the Avian Extermination Act was supposed to have gotten rid of all birds within 18 miles of Night City. This, and the fact that Ciri is called Ziriel, or the Swallow, and swallows are often used in reference to her throughout The Witcher 3, leads many to believe that this is a connection as well. There are also 5 pieces of gear in Cyberpunk that feature Witcher names and imagery, including the Wolf School jacket, Wolf School t-shirt, Galaxy t-shirt, Black Unicorn katana, and Shoop the Troll plushie. All of this leads some theories to say that these games actually exist in the same timeline, but I think the Retro Gaming magazine kind of makes that clearly untrue. Overall, it is probably just CD Projekt Red having fun with 2 of their original franchises. E3 Demo Changes is about the changes that took place between the 2018 E3 demo and the release of the game in 2020. This was a pretty bones-deep revision that was necessary because CD Projekt Red did not have the resources to make an entire game like the one shown at E3. This included scaled-down graphics, less advanced NPC behavior, a more simplistic police system, the removal of major gameplay mechanics like wall running and dual weapon wielding, a reduction in RPG elements and choice impact, less open-world interactivity and random encounters, driving physics became a little less smooth and natural, and monorail fast travel was also removed. There was also a brain dance feature in the demo that would allow players to explore memories in high detail, but brain dances were removed overall except for heavily scripted instances. Basically, the world as a whole was made a little less dense, and the player had a little less control over the story than previously indicated. Many find the E3 demo to be deliberately misleading, but I still wonder if, when they put that demo together, CD Projekt Red really did think they could pull off that scale of game, even if they thought so with ample hubris. FF06B5 is a code that appears on some statues in Night City that leads many players into confusions, but are actually all connected. This is one of the oldest mysteries in Cyberpunk, has led to people questioning devs at Q&As, and even has its own subreddit with about 40,000 members at the time of writing this. We will talk about the entire story of these codes and their background in Tier 5. V's real name is Vincent if you chose a male character, and Valerie if you chose female. V probably goes by this for 2 reasons. One is that a single letter has a lot more ambiguity than something like Vincent or Valerie, and allows the character to become whoever they want while maintaining a certain level of hidden identity. 2 is that you can record half as many voice lines if both the character options have the same name. Don't Fear the Reaper is a hidden and incredibly difficult to complete ending. To even be given the option for this ending, you need to have a relic rating of at least 70% and reach the Nocturne OP55 in one mission. In this mission, there is a point where you meet Johnny Silverhand on a balcony to discuss your final plan, and if you choose to sit quietly for a few minutes, Johnny will grow tired of the prolonged silence and suggests that you go in guns blazing. What he means by this is going into Arasaka Tower with no backup, and if you agree, this starts the Don't Fear the Reaper path. There are no save points once you get going, and if you die, that's it. To succeed, you're going to have to face every single enemy type that Arasaka has, which is hordes of soldiers and mechs and drones alone. After the final confrontation, V still faces the dilemma of how to deal with the biochip. Johnny offers to take control of V's body permanently, or V can choose to have her consciousness uploaded into Mikoshi. If you die during the assault on Arasaka Tower, the game ends, and Johnny will narrate a special failure screen, essentially confirming that V died in the attempt, which even standalone is a good ending. Rough launch is pretty self-explanatory. When Cyberpunk launched, it was a nightmare and basically unplayable. CD Projekt made a big apology and offered refunds, but by that point, a lot of people had already written the game off entirely, something that has since been overshadowed by the community the game has cultivated since release. Dogtown is a walled-off area east of the Pacific subdistricts of Coastview and Westwind Estate. Back in 2050, Pacifica was going to be a high-end tourist district with a bunch of big investors in Night City wanting to see it succeed, but development stopped in 2069 with the start of the Unification War. If you don't know, and you need to because this is going to come up a lot, this was a war fought between the new United States and the Free States of North America. The NUSA pretty much occupied everywhere that opposed it by the end of the war except for North California and Texas. The Arasaka Corporation wanted to get a foothold in the country after their exile following the Fourth Corporate War, so they funded a lot of Free States war efforts and helped fortify Night City against NUSA attacks. While tensions mounted, it became clear that the NUSA would probably try to invade Night City, and the easiest way to do this would be from South California. To get into Night City from South California, you would have to go through Pacifica. So the investors pulled out and left miles of half-built concrete monstrosities in their wake. In this control vacuum, NUSA Colonel Kurt Hansen decided to take control of part of the district to prepare for an attack on Night City proper. That never happened though, because on June 12, 2070, an Arasaka supercarrier arrived in Del Coronado Bay, making it pretty clear that either the NUSA needed to get out of town or they were going to start deleting things from existence. Neither side really wanted to escalate into a full-blown war between Arasaka and Militech. This led to the proposal of the Treaty of Unification, which was signed by NUSA President Myers in Arvin, California. This would lead the treaty to later be called the Arvin Accords. The Arvin Accords also allowed Arasaka to do business in North America again, ending their exile. But while all of this was happening, that Colonel Hansen guy from earlier just refused to leave Pacifica and decided to set up his own little dictatorship in the area that he occupied. This lawless subdistrict would later be named Dogtown. Update 2.0 rework was an overhaul of a lot of core systems of the game and one of the things that made it way more playable. Perks and skill trees were filled out, combat and AI were dramatically improved along with the police response system, which now operates on a heat basis like GTA. Vehicular combat got a lot of added depth and economy, and crafting systems streamlined to fit more cleanly into the gameplay loop. Perhaps most impactful of all though was the cyberware revision, which made clothing pretty much just cosmetic and implants the primary way to manipulate one's stats. This allowed players to experiment more with different builds and opens up a lot more options for combat and ability implementation. It was released 1 week before the Phantom Liberty expansion. Canon Comic Books refers to the published comic series that contain canonized lore of the cyberpunk world. Primarily, the lore comes from the original tabletop game and the CD Projekt Red game, but there are some others, like these comics, that are considered canon as well. This includes Trauma Team, a 4-issue Dark Horse comic published series that follows Nadia, an assistant EMT for Trauma Team International. Nadia is the sole survivor of a rescue mission gone wrong, and the next client she's assigned to is the guy who got her squad killed. It's a good, gritty medical series that has a lot of moral questions Nadia has to answer. Another is Your Voice, which is a digital comic about an everyday citizen named Frank who tries to navigate dangerous daily life in Night City without the combat skills or group protection we are used to seeing from main characters. The third is Big City Dreams, which is about Tasha and Mirik, two scavengers who get mixed up in a brain dance that may give them a chance to get out of their awful lot in life. It presents ideas of escapism in the cyberpunk world in a way not quite touched in the mainline titles. Next we have Rebecca's Shotgun. Rebecca was a character in Cyberpunk Edgerunners who primarily worked with her brother Pillar. They went on a mission assigned by Corpo Fixer Faraday, with David Martinez and his driver Falco to apprehend an Arasaka convoy. It was a betrayal though, just a ploy for Faraday to get the attention of Arasaka to offer his services. During the confrontation with the convoy in Memorial Park, Rebecca is killed by Atom Smasher. If you visit Memorial Park as V, you can find Rebecca's custom Carnage shotgun Guts still there under a bush. Phantom Liberty is the espionage-based expansion released in 2023 that takes place in Dogtown. V works as a government agent to answer a distress call from NUSA President Rosalind Myers. This is done with the help of NUSA Special Operations Agent Solomon Reed. The plot is huge, and the expansion has enough content to be a standalone game all on its own, so we won't go through all of it now. Just know that Colonel Hansen definitely is not a good guy, but the NUSA also seems to have its own ulterior motives in everything it does. Skippy is an AI-assisted handgun and a variant of the Arasaka HJKE-11. It can be found in an alley in Vista del Rey Haywood. While the weapon itself can be missed by some players, it also has its own lore, which we will go into further down the berg. Things Done Changed is an ending in Phantom Liberty. In this ending, V sides with the new United States government, turning in Songbird and helping Solomon Reed complete his final objectives. V also undergoes an experimental procedure to remove the relic and Johnny Silverhand once and for all. Doing this comes at the cost of all cybernetic enhancements, street cred, and connections in Night City. V is left to lead a much simpler and quieter life, far from the high-stakes world of mercenary work, to reflect on the height of her power and the choices she made to arrive there. Nibbles and the Iguana are two pets that can be added to V's apartment in Megabuilding H10. Nibbles is a hairless cat that is found in a bowl in the corridor of the building that you can take back to the apartment and feed. V and Johnny will observe it sleeping in a laundry basket not long after, and it will live at the apartment from then on. The iguana comes from an iguana egg that can be found during the heist mission in Yorinobu's penthouse. Yorinobu has one of the last iguanas in existence, and you can find the egg in its enclosure. V can take it back to her apartment, and after completing playing for time, gets a bowl to put it in. After a 90-day period, it hatches, and you've got a priceless reptile that will lay around and interact with Nibbles sometimes. Depending on what ending you get, both Nibbles and the iguana may be adopted by different characters that you have met thus far. Hideo Kojima appears in the heist mission in Konpeki Plaza's bar lounge as Hideyoshi Oshima. He's a braindance producer from Tokyo who talks about wanting to make narrative-driven media and wanting to go beyond action-oriented storytelling. Some interesting trivia is that in Japanese, Kojima means Little Island, while Oshima means Big Island. Another connection to Kojima Productions is that V can also find a bridge baby pod from Death Stranding during the Hunt mission in the NCPD lab. Produced by Studio Trigger, Cyberpunk Edgerunners is an anime series prequel to Cyberpunk 2077. It's a 10-episode standalone series that tells the story of David Martinez, who was mentioned earlier, who becomes an edgerunner after his mother is killed in a corpo heist. It's a whole series, so we don't have time to talk about all of the story, but you should go watch it if you like the nobodies fighting against everything to survive type of story. Cut content is about the ton of content that never made it into the final game. There is a huge amount of it, a lot of which we already talked about, and some of which will come back later. Johnny talking in loading screens refers to Johnny Silverhand speaking directly to you if you wait around long enough on the loading screens without pressing any buttons to continue. It's nothing very unique really, he just expands on the ideas he has already presented and the philosophies that motivate him. He'll also give some updates on what is happening in the story and what V has most recently done in the game world. Wall Guns is about the collectible weapons that will be displayed in V's apartment as they are accumulated. These include Johnny Silverhand's custom-made Malorian Arms 3516, Pan Am's Overwatch variant of the Tektronika SPT-32 Grad sniper rifle, Judy Alvarez's Mox variant of the Carnage shotgun, La Chingana Dorada, a custom Tsunami Nu that belonged to Jackie Wells, and Saburo Arasaka's Satori Katana. Takemura Can Survive the Ambush is talking about the Search and Destroy mission. After you get away from Arasaka soldiers in Redwood Market in Japantown, Goro Takemura will inform you that he has taken Hanako Arasaka to a safe house in an abandoned apartment building in Haywood. V goes to talk to Hanako, but while that is happening, they hear weird noises coming from outside. V goes to take a look, and immediately after, the apartment is raided by Arasaka, and you are given an objective to escape the building. If you just run out, Takemura dies, but you have the option to go back to the third floor and save him, the two of you fighting your way out together. If he is not saved, he will not appear during the Devil ending if it is chosen during Nocturne OP55N1, and you won't be able to get the Devil achievement, even if you choose to side with Arasaka in the end. If V goes to the fourth floor of the building, she can find the High Priestess tarot card, which is meant to be a representation of Hanako. Also, if you look in the right place after the safe house is breached, you can see Atom Smasher carrying Hanako into an Aerodyne. Your breathtaking is the meme. You already know what I'm talking about, but I'm going to tell you anyway. At a Cyberpunk press conference at E3 2019, Keanu Reeves described the world of Night City by saying, "Walking the streets of the future will really be breathtaking." At which point a fan, Peter Sark, shouted, "You're breathtaking." Keanu then confirmed that Peter, and in fact the entire audience, were all breathtaking as well. More evidence that Keanu is just the best celebrity there is. To finish off Tier 1, we have Soul Killer. Originally created in the 2000s by Alt Cunningham, Soul Killer began as a storage matrix intended to contain artificial, specifically non-human, personalities. However, during its development, she was awed to realize that this matrix could also be used not only to store the minds of living persons, but to transfer these digitized engrams to and from physical bodies seamlessly. Alt envisioned it as a form of immortality, a tool to preserve the consciousness and memories of dying individuals. In 2013, Arasaka kidnapped Alt and forced her to create an improved version of Soul Killer for their use. This made netrunning incredibly dangerous because Soul Killer could trace and extract the mind of an intruding netrunner almost instantly. Arasaka exec Toshiro Harada tried to betray Alt by digitizing her once the project was complete, but she had built in a controller override and took control of the Arasaka mainframe, killing her guards and preparing to get back into her physical body. That didn't work though, because Johnny Silverhand tried to rescue her at the same time, disconnecting her body from the machines and leaving her consciousness stranded in the net. During the Fourth Corporate War, Arasaka got better with the Soul Killer and figured out how to keep subjects' engrams preserved for interrogation later. Part of the reason for the 2023 Arasaka Tower attack was to wipe the Soul Killer 3.0 version from the Arasaka mainframe, and while this was effective, it only slowed the technology's advancement by a few years. In the 2070s, Arasaka began creation of the Relic program, which was meant to store the engrams of soul-killed individuals where they could interact with them. It was described as a valuable technology for general use, but it was really only meant for Saburo Arasaka's personal use. Relic developer Anders Hellman was getting a lot of pressure to complete the project in spite of multiple failed 1.0 attempts and decided to go ahead with 2.0 even though it was still in its experimental phase. Hellman had to figure out who was going to be the test specimen for Relic 2.0 and, unfortunately for him, and everyone else involved, he chose Johnny Silverhand, thinking that if the relic were destroyed, it wouldn't really matter. And that is the end of Tier 1, Megabuilding H10. Now it's time to move on to Tier 2, the Badlands. While Tier 1 was much more general facts and common knowledge, Tier 2 begins to get a bit more obscure. We will begin Tier 2 with Rebel Path Cello version. Rebel Path Cello version is one of, if not the most recognizable track in the Cyberpunk world. But if you go to the official soundtrack on any platform, you won't find it. I haven't been able to find any sources saying why this is, so if you've got any ideas, drop them in the comments. I would say it's because of some licensing issue, but there's literally no evidence pointing toward that. It's not unheard of for some games to leave specific audio tracks out of their published OSTs so that it will be more associated with in-game moments, so that's a possibility as well. Either way, there are a lot of fan uploads of the song, so thankfully it can still be accessed. Deus Ex cutscenes refers to the original intention for the game to have a mixture of first and third person cutscenes like the Deus Ex series. These were removed sometime during 2019, and while some sources seem to think this was about keeping the player directly engaged with the story, I would say it was just one of the many cutbacks made during this time that we talked about earlier. While it would be cool to see your own V walking and talking in the game world, I don't really think it would add that much to the experience. But that could just be the copium talking. The USSR is exactly what it sounds like. The Neo-Soviet Union is alive and well in 2077 and consists of 15 member states: Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Moldova. It has had its own fair share of internal conflicts as well between a petrochemical corporation Sovoil and Petrochem in the Second Corporate War. The new Soviet Union and China are also in competition for a weapons contract with Arasaka that would put the losing party at a severe disadvantage. Next we have the Black Wall, which is a barrier between the net and rogue artificial intelligence entities, originally created by Netwatch in the wake of the data crash. This was an event orchestrated by hacker Ratch Bartmus, whose main objective in life was to harass and undermine corporations in any way he could. In September of 2014, he planted the Rabbids virus on the old net so that it would be released in the event of his death. And sometime in 2020, that is exactly what happened, in a cryogenic sleep when his life support systems malfunctioned. While his consciousness survived in the net, it too would eventually succumb to time when his signal was tracked and digital personality deleted on May 6, 2022. Just as promised, the Rabbids virus was released and was meant to cut into corpo data fortresses to unleash their data across the old net, but the final effect was very different, because it wasn't just company secrets hidden in those data fortresses. Countless military-grade AIs were released into the wild with no system in existence prepared for entities of such power. By June 3rd, 78% of the old net was infected and unusable. The world shut down and governments had to resort to 20th century technologies like punch cards and physical records just to stay afloat. So NetWatch created the Black Wall to contain infected parts of the old net. This was the event that separates old net and the net we see in 2077. As a result of the data crash, corporations didn't want to be connected to the outside world anymore, and this led to thousands of fragmented private networks shielded behind the Black Wall. There are some, like the Voodoo Boys, who want to contact rogue AIs on the other side though, much like V does when she calls on Alt Cunningham. Cameos refers to the many celebrities that appear in Night City, including Grimes as Lizzie Wizzy and Sasha Grey as Ash in Phantom Liberty. Of course, Hideo Kojima also makes an appearance, as we talked about earlier, and perhaps most interesting of all, Mike Ponsmith, the creator of the original tabletop game, appears as a bartender in the afterlife. It was unknown who voiced Atom Smasher upon release of 2077, but he is voiced by Alec Newman in Edgerunners, so it is generally accepted that he did the role in both and could count as a cameo on his own. Cynosure was a failed project by Militech in the early 2020s to create a tool that would allow their netrunners to capture and tame rogue AIs. It was also supposed to be a competitor to the up-and-coming Soul Killer weapon being created by Arasaka. It was shuttered and buried, though, sometime halfway through the century, and no one really knows why. There are stories of accidents in the depths of the Militech labs, and even some that think they successfully captured rogue AIs but were unable to contain them. It is also likely that NetWatch or Arasaka caught wind of the project and they had to cover their tracks to avoid being found out. The NUSA and Kurt Hansen both have reasons for using what remains of Project Cynosure as a launching pad to probe the Black Wall for ways to control the AIs beyond. You can fail Phantom Liberty is pretty self-explanatory again. If you refuse to rescue President Myers or just choose to walk away after rescuing her, it's possible to fail the entire expansion story. Mr. Blue Eyes Observing You is next, and I told you he'd be back. During both Dream On and The Killing Moon, he is watching V from a distance. He does not interact with her and does not interact with any of the people around him in the city, just watches and waits. As I said before, he will be returning down the Iceberg. Other expansions were planned refers to at least one canceled expansion for the main game that was canceled as CD Projekt Red was recovering from their botched release. There were reports of at least 2 planned expansions, but the Senior Vice President of Business Development, Mikkel Nowakowski, has since confirmed that Phantom Liberty will be the only one. Lizzie's Cyberpsychosis is talking about Lizzie Wizzy, the performer I mentioned earlier, that is played by Grimes, and her mental illness brought on by cybernetic body alteration. As the trauma team medical docs define it, cyberpsychosis is a collective term for all psychotic and anxiety-related personality disorders caused by hardware implanted in the body and any and all behavioral mods, including software. This is especially relevant to Lizzie because she has replaced almost every organic part of her body with cybernetic augmentations. Born Elizabeth Wissenfirth, she had a pretty successful career as a musical artist, but everything would change in 2071. When Lizzie would introduce her new cyber-modified form at a concert that was an erotic reimagining of Snow White. Toward the end of the concert, she ate an apple, which was purposely laced with poison to send her into cardiac arrest. For a complete minute, the screen showed her flatlined electrocardiogram while her body was motionless on the floor. Over the next 5.5 hours, a team of Ripper docs replaced her biological organs with more technology implants and successfully revived her. And she performed her new single, Restart, Reheart, Repeat, that would sit at the top of every world music chart until 2072. In case this wasn't clear, this all comes at a cost of one's mental health. This is exemplified when her boyfriend, Liam Northam, begins working with a contact at Arasaka to secretly create an Ingram copy of Lizzie's personality. Lizzie thinks he's cheating on her and hires V to do some investigation. When she learns what is actually going on, she isn't too happy because she strangles Liam, breaking his spine in the process, and then tells V to do whatever with the body, as long as it's gotten rid of and pays extra for the trouble. Lizzie also lies to V about the cause of death, saying that she pushed him and it was an accident. And I get being a little upset if your boyfriend was going around behind your back to do stuff like this. I think that's probably normal. The spine breaking stuff might be where we start to get into cyber psycho territory, especially since she immediately starts planning how she will spin this event to get sympathy from her fans. More haunting still, V learns from recovered security footage that Liam was concerned, that Lizzie was not acting like herself and was scared to confront her. This was why he was having the Ingram created in the first place. Turns out, yeah, that was probably for a good reason. Before leaving, Lizzie thanks V for giving her something beautiful and that she loves what she is turning into. Next we have Johnny is bi, and yeah, he is. Ignoring the fact that he flirts with and makes suggestive comments about both men and women, he literally says so during the automatic love mission. When visiting a strip club called Totentons, he reminisces about a lap dance he got there from a Latino stripper with his guitarist, Carrie. V comments that she thought he preferred girls, and Johnny says that mostly he does, but now and then he swung both ways. I also saw a YouTube comment that called him Johnny, I've had too much tequila to be straight Silverhand, which is a title I believe he would approve of. Johnny's memories are not accurate is something that's pretty clear if you pay attention to the dialogue of the game. It's not so much that he's lying as much as embellishing some stories and just blurring the lines between swagger and fact. I would also say that 54 years as an Ingram doesn't help with keeping a clear head. Panam's scar is referring to the wound Panam Palmer receives during the AV raid in the mission Lightning Breaks. After getting shot, she assures V that it was nothing and she's fine, but for the rest of the game, she will have a pretty serious scar across her hip where she was hit. Carrie's ex-wife is something that can be discovered during the Rebel mission, when visiting the home of samurai guitarist Carrie Uridine. If V looks at his laptop, she will see messages with his ex-wife Louise Norden Uridine, in which they discuss their children, Ted and Kim. Carrie can be a romantic interest for male V, even though this man is 86 years old when they meet. Interestingly enough, Mike Ponsmith imagined Carrie in 2077 to look like Johnny Depp from the new Elixir Dior ad in which he was playing a guitar. Project Orion is the codename of 2077's sequel game, announced on October 4th, 2022. After the release of the Phantom Liberty expansion, the core team responsible for Cyberpunk 2077 moved to Boston and established a new hub of the North American CD Projekt Red branch. At the beginning of 2024, the Boston team, with help from the Vancouver and Warsaw crews, began development on the project. No future is a phrase often seen depicted in graffiti in Night City. It is a sign of cultural disdain and rebellion against the corporations and the elite in general. It can be seen even in the older versions of Night City from Johnny's flashbacks, as well as present day in clubs, most districts of the city, Judy Alvarez's brain dance setup, and in front of Megabuilding H10. Oddly enough, that specific location was painted by Johnny Silverhand and has remained as a reminder that people have not gotten any happier in the last half century. Number 1 Surgeon is a strange one, and the event it refers to can be found in the mission Big in Japan. In this mission, V is hired by Dennis Cranmer to pick up Haruyoshi Nishikata, a surgeon wanted by the Tiger Claws, from the waterfront and bring him to safety. Turns out Haruyoshi was supposed to operate on one of the Tiger Claw bosses because of his reputation for never making mistakes while operating. He ended up killing the boss on purpose though, and fleeing from Japan to Night City, where Dennis hires V to receive him. What's interesting is that all of this is a reference to The Office. In Season 6, Episode 9, called Happy Hour, a warehouse worker named Hidetoshi Hasegawa tells the exact same backstory, except in that case, it's Daryl Philbin who saves him instead of Dennis Cranmer. Mr. Hand's backstory is actually the backstory of a man named Wade Bleecker. See, Wade used to be an executive for a mega corporation called Petrochemical Associates International, who, you may remember, was a major player in their rivalry with Sovoil during the Second Corporate War. There was a shakeup in leadership, and Wade was chosen as the fall guy, which was pretty literal because they tried to kill him. It didn't work though, and he survived, moving to Pacifica in Night City and becoming a fixer. To avoid being found by Petrochem, he never did business in person and refused to even show his face on calls, with the most anyone ever saw being his metal hands. This is what gained him the name Mr. Hands. He's a very cool character, but depending on your knowledge base of internet lore, the name Mr. Hands may have a very different meaning to you. And if not, well, then I implore you to continue a life of bliss and not Google it. Ever. Next is V's age discrepancy. When creating your character, their birth date is shown on the upper right corner of the customization screen. Upon launch, the male V was born on June 10th, 2049, and the female V on October 12th, 2049. This would make V about 28 at the start of the game. However, this was changed with patch 2.0, and now they are both listed as having been born on October 12th, but now in 2053, making them 23, since, judging from radio broadcasts and passing comments from other characters, the game's story begins somewhere between January and August 2077. For whatever reason though, the first time the birth date was seen, during a showcase of the character creation prior to the game's release, the date was October 12th, 2054. Not really sure why there were so many changes to this, but it probably has to do with the lack of communication leading to the release. In any case, V is now, canonically, 23 years old. The reunification war was the conflict that we discussed in Tier 1 that led to the signing of the Arvin Accords and the creation of Dogtown. The Militech backed in USA attempted to incorporate the Arasaka-backed Free States and failed, allowing Arasaka to gain a foothold on the continent and allowing Night City to be fully independent. Mercman is Night City's Batman. On the side job, Mercman returns again once more forever. You will arrive at the same tunnels where Nash's Raffenschiff hideout was. Down there, you'll find an old shipping container with tactical equipment and a completely black Rayfield Caliburn hypercar called the Mercmobile. There is also a shard titled, "Read this every day, never give up, remember your purpose." On the shard is pretty much the story of Bruce Wayne. A kid's parents are murdered and he vows to fight crime from the shadows. Since he hasn't come back for this stuff, we can either assume that he underestimated the danger of crime fighting or, I don't know, got a job. Night City gasses its homeless is one of the darker headlines to be seen on the World News Service. It details how Watson District sewers are going to be fumigated to clear out the homeless population living there, and residents are advised to stay clear of storm drains, sewer entrances, and wastewater outlets due to the use of neurotoxins. Homelessness has been a chronic issue in Night City since the mob wars ended in 2011. When the Corpos installed a puppet mayor and city official, the first order of business was to restore a lot of the corporate districts and city centers, along with many neighborhoods as well. And the city didn't pay for the renovations they required, so if you couldn't afford to completely remodel where you lived, you would no longer have a place to live. From there, the problem has only gotten worse. Ciri visited Night City is what we talked about earlier in the Witcher references section. When Geralt reunites with Ciri in The Witcher 3, she talks about visiting a world where people wore metal in their heads and waged war from afar. Because of the other connections between The Witcher and Cyberpunk, this has led many people to believe that Ciri visited Night City during her travels, though the worlds definitely do not exist in the same canon. Jackie's Ingram refers to V choosing not to send Jackie Wells' body to his mother at the end of the heist mission. If she does not, the body will ultimately end up with Arasaka, who will upload his Ingram to Mikoshi. One small bonus is that V will be able to speak with his Ingram with Hanako in The Devil ending, which is nice but does not offer the finality that sending his body to his family does. DJ007 is another outside reference made in Cyberpunk to another franchise, or in this case, to an actor's relation to another franchise. In the Phantom Liberty official cinematic trailer, around the 1 minute and 15 second mark, you can see a sign over Solomon Reed's shoulder showing a stock market report that says the Dow Jones Industrial Average is up by 0.07 points. The DJ part is because Idris Elba also does work as a DJ in real life, and had a role in the original game as the DJ for Station 99.9 Impulse. The 007 part is generally accepted as a connection to James Bond, with there being a lot of speculation at a certain point of him taking over the role after Daniel Craig's tenure ended. And that is Tier 2, the Badlands. Now it's time for Tier 3, Dogtown. At this tier, we start getting information only available for those that really go out of their way to search for it. and start dipping into the extended lore of the Cyberpunk universe. First off, in the third tier, we have You Can Call Jackie in Act 2. If you call Jackie's number in Act 2 after he has died, V will leave a message. Or at least she'll start to, and then decide that it's stupid and hang up. From what we do get to hear, she wants to apologize for his death and wonders where he is or if he can hear her. Columbarium Memorials is referring to story-related updates made to the Columbarium in southern Northoak. As you progress through the story, characters that have died will have niches that appear here. And there's a lot. From what I could find, about 73 of them. These include Lucius Rhine, Alt Cunningham, Jackie Wells, and even V herself. Wall running was more cut content from that removal window we talked about earlier between the shown demos and the game's official release. Originally seen in an August 2018 upload that showed 48 minutes of gameplay, including V using mantis blades and wall running. According to a 2020 Game Reactor article, level designer Max Pierce said it was removed for design reasons, and it looks like there are no plans to replace it in the game because that scale of movement mechanic requires a lot of bespoke level design that would be very difficult to implement at this stage of the game's lifespan. Next, we have dialogue changes based on relic rating. Depending on your interaction with Johnny, there will be alternative dialogue options that open between him and V, but also between him, V, and other characters. An example of this can be found in the Holding On side job when you first meet Carrie Uridine. He asks Johnny if he and V are getting along, and if you have a high relic rating, Johnny will say, "Sure, the kid loves me," whereas if you have a low relic rating, he will say, "Not lately, no, not like we have much of a choice though." If you recall the Don't Fear the Reaper ending from Tier 1, then you will also know that having a high relic rating unlocks a completely alternative ending that is fully unavailable otherwise. The Real Aguilar refers to an event in the Phantom Liberty side job Run This Town. The mission involves Mr. Hands hiring V to pose as Cuban cartel mercenary Aguilar Nubiola. He wants to use Aguilar's reputation in Dogtown to manipulate the future leadership situation of the region to be something more in Mr. Hands' favor. Basically, he likes one person who wants to be in charge and not the other. After completing the mission, V will get a text from the real Aguilar saying, "Perhaps one day we will meet and learn just how well an imitation can rival the original, if at all. How amusing that would be." Cyberpsychosis is a cover-up is an interesting one because here we get some actual first-hand information. Under a Reddit post discussing cyberpsychosis, there is a reply by Reddit user The Real Max Mike, and from everything I can see on the profile and the interactions had on it, this seems to be the account of Mike Ponsmith, the creator of the original tabletop game and sometime bartender at the Afterlife. According to Mike, cyberpsychosis is a real thing, but is often misconstrued. It's a disorder that in part depends on the subject's overall internal susceptibility and even has its own stat in the tabletop game called humanity. He says it is easiest to think of it as basically the same thing as heavy anabolic steroid use. Not everyone who juices ends up crazy mad with roid rage, but those who are more susceptible to the need to take more steroids are more likely to hit a point where they do flip into roid rage. This can be seen clearly in the case of someone like Lizzie Wizzy, who had pre-existing issues in her obsession with fame and brand image, so she was already someone more likely to have issues with cyberpsychosis. Since we do not know V's full backstory, it's hard to say why she has no issues with this, but it is partially because Johnny Silverhand being in her head keeps her grounded enough to counteract any cyberpsychotic symptoms. Mr. Skippy's origins is the lore I promised when we first talked about Mr. Skippy in Tier 1. Skippy is an AI-assisted handgun and a variant of the Arasaka HJKE-11. While V can find it lying in an alleyway, it does not belong to the corpse next to it. Instead, it used to belong to former journalist turned fixer, Regina Jones. Regina won Skippy in a poker game with a techie called Danish. It was later stolen from her, and that was how it eventually ended up in the hands of a mercenary. If you decline to bring Skippy to Regina during the machine gun side job, his dialogue will change and will only consist of him screaming "no" and "bad user" until he is returned. Another interesting note is that, if V has acquired Delamain number 21 from the Don't Lose Your Mind mission, Delamain and Skippy will interact like two colleagues, which makes sense, seeing as they are both AIs working for V. Jotaro Shobo is not a great guy. An upper-ranking member of the Tiger Claws and owner of the Ho-Oh Club, Jotaro may only appear in one mission, but evidence of his misdeeds can be found all over Night City. Not only is he a violent and merciless leader to the Tiger Claws, he also makes brain dances intended for a very unique clientele. I'm not going to read these because most of it would have to be censored anyway, but just take a look at these messages and I think you can get the idea of the sort of thing these feature. Jotaro is also an enjoyer of mutilation in his private time and has earned himself the name the Devil of Kabuki. He only gets away with this for so long though, as Mox netrunners eventually find his location at the Ho-Oh Club and contact Regina Jones to send someone to assassinate him. Regina, enjoyably enough for the player, will choose to send V to complete the mission Monster Hunt. SSI is AI controlled takes us back to the Dream On mission and the Peralez couple. SSI, or Secure Services Incorporated, was contracted as personal private security for the Peralez household. They considered both Jefferson and Elizabeth in VIP status, and the company's priority was to protect them from any and all dangers, including regards to privacy and emotional stability. SSI agents were tasked to report about any behavioral anomalies, no matter if the Peralezes were in their apartment or somewhere else. Unknown to Elizabeth and Jefferson, SSI was a front for an unknown party that sought to mold them into the ideal political couple and pave the way for Jefferson to become Night City's mayor. The question is, who or what made the decision that he should be mayor? Considering Johnny had a weird feeling about the whole thing and Mr. Blue Eyes' involvement, this would not be an out-of-place take. Another strange bit of lore about the company is that there are a large number of unmarked black cars that cross paths with V on her way to meet the Peralezes at various points in the investigation, and when scanned, register as belonging to Secure Services Incorporated. LifePath-specific quests are missions whose availability is dependent upon the player's choice between Street Kid, Corpo, and Nomad. For Nomad, V goes and gets her original Thornton Galena car that we drive in the intro back from Lana Pierce. Lana found the car in the wasteland and wants to get it up and running because she wants to get away from Night City and start a new life, and doesn't have the eddies to buy a car of her own. V has three options: threaten Lana and take the car, pay Lana an obscene price for the Galena, or just let her keep it and suggest some repairs to make. I chose to pay Lana for the car because yes, I felt bad for her, but the Galena is a really sick car. The character Lana Prince is also heavily based on Australian game writer and journalist Alana Pierce, who voices her. For Corpo, V's former Arasaka co-worker Frank Nostra will reach out, saying that he was downsized out of the company and has incriminating files on their former boss, Susan Abernathy. When V actually goes to meet Frank, it turns out that he was purged from Arasaka like she was, but does not have files about Susan. Instead, his plan is to capture V and give her to Arasaka to try and get his job back. At this point, there is once again three options: react violently and incapacitate or kill Frank, be diplomatic and suggest that Frank accept the gospel of the gun like V did and begin a new life in the underbelly of Night City, or be callous, and while Frank will thank you for this direct approach and leave peacefully, he will end up taking his own life. For Street Kid, V is reached out to by a fixer named Kirk Sawyer following Jackie's ofrenda. Kirk offers to meet at El Coyote Cojo and tells V that there is a load of experimental Militech cyberware that has just arrived from Shanghai, and he wants her to steal it. V meets Kirk and his bodyguard Big Joe near the location, but when she goes to search the cargo van supposedly containing said cyberware, it's just full of fake merchandise from Johnny Silverhand's band Samurai. Upon returning to the meeting spot, she finds that both Kirk and Big Joe have been executed by members of the Valentino gang. So the whole thing was a setup to lure Kirk to a neutral place for an assassination. Gary the Prophet and Maximum Mike are right refers to two strange and generally elusive characters, even by Night City standards. Gary the Prophet, or Gary Winkler, can often be seen wandering the streets around Watson, evangelizing his strange theories. Most of them have to do with lizard men from Alpha Centauri, things lurking in the depths of Arasaka, and his suspicions that nomads are werewolves. V has the opportunity to save his life when he makes two Aldecados mad with that last theory, and he tells her that he has implants that enable him to listen to communication channels which he believes are aliens. Gary sends V to what he says is a meeting place of the lizard men, but it turns out to be members of the Maelstrom gang having an exchange with two corpos. V discovers an encrypted chip from the area with a concerning message that we will talk about later, and upon returning to Gary's location, he has disappeared and was replaced by one of his disciples. They tell V that Gary was abducted, describing the abductors as well-dressed corpos with distinctly blue eyes. While they went to the NCPD for help, they discounted the event as more of Gary's and his followers' insanity. If they are insane, then so is V, because she has also repeatedly seen a corpo with blue eyes following her. Johnny believes the story as well, concluding that while it probably happened, it was more likely corrupt corpos than anything alien. Later, V can find a niche for Gary Winkler in the columbarium with the caption, "He knew too much, so they dealt with him." Maximum Mike is a radio host on 107.3 Moro Rock Radio. His show is similar to something like Art Bell in its content, discussing strange theories and taking reports about odd occurrences from listeners. Mike claims to have friends in high places at companies like Biotechnica that feed him sensitive and secret information. He talks of a fondness for visual art, and specifically Austrian symbolist Gustav Klimt, although believes that anything displayed in museums is a forgery due to real artwork being shipped to the moon. This may seem like a wild statement, but both Arasaka and Militech have underground mining cities on the moon, so it would make sense if some execs were ferrying their valuable art up there for safekeeping. While he adds a certain amount of sensationalism to the things he talks about, a lot of it has a basis in fact. He is also voiced by Mike Ponsmith, so another interesting appearance by the game's creator. The same can be said for Gary the Prophet, who, while his ideas were a bit more on the manic end of the spectrum, still knew something important enough to be a problem for someone with power. Next, we have unused samurai songs. There is a samurai song created for the game called Archangel that was not released with the rest of the songs when the game came out. Parts of it can be heard in the 2013 Riot scene as well as the mission Holdin' On. Fortunately, Archangel was released officially alongside the 1.5 update. Zen Master Identity refers to a man that V can meet in Reconciliation Park. He speaks with her about meditation and can show her a meditation brain dance about the element of earth. After the final interaction with the Zen Master, he leaves behind an altar which V can display in her apartment. The issue is, when you reference the interaction with Johnny, he is completely unaware that it even happened, and has no idea who the Zen Master is. This leads some people to think that he is an illusion of V's psyche, but that isn't true because other characters talk about his existence. We can see him talked about in emails on Misty Olszewski's laptop, and Maximum Mike even talks about him on his show, believing him to be data crash responsible hacker Ratch Bartmus. But of course, we know this also isn't true because V has seen Ratch's corpse. While he does wear similar robes to monks seen praying to one of the FF06B5 statues, there is nothing else connecting him. The Zen Master is one of the few characters that remains a complete mystery. The North Oak Casino and Country Club is an extremely exclusive, luxurious institution for the elite of Night City, only accessible by Aerodyne. It is so exclusive that not even V can get close enough, while the casino and its grounds are fully textured and placed in the world. The player cannot actually go there. It has advertisements all over the city, and many hope that it would be added in 2.0, but that does not appear to be the case. It probably was going to be a part of that second DLC that was canceled in favor of Phantom Liberty, and we will never get to feel the glory of a cyberpunk slot machine. Maiko at the Black Sapphire is a callback to the mission You Know My Name from Phantom Liberty. In this mission, V and Solomon Reed infiltrate the Black Sapphire Hotel in Dogtown, and inside you can see Tiger Claw's associate and Cloud's manager Maiko Maeda in a corner booth talking with two Tiger Claw bosses and two upper-ranking soldiers from the USSR, surrounded by a crowd of bodyguards. The deal being struck? No one knows. Wakako sold out Evelyn Parker. Evelyn Parker was a sex worker at Clouds who was originally responsible for the Konpeki Plaza heist. She was the consort of Yorinobu Arasaka, and knowing this, the Voodoo Boys wanted to record her visiting him in his apartment so they could locate Johnny Silverhand's Ingram. When she realized this, Evelyn decided she wanted it for her own profit and offered it to Netwatch in exchange for her new identity. This didn't happen, of course, because the heist went horribly wrong and Evelyn went into hiding with the Moxes at Lizzie's bar. She had to return to work eventually though, and once at Clouds and back on the net, the Voodoo Boys weren't too happy with her at this point and hit her with a pretty intense cyber attack to shut her up. Clouds caretaker Oswald Woodman Forrest tried to restore her to working order and, after failing, had his way with her unconscious body. He took her to Ripper Doc Fingers, who also had no luck, and Woodman left her with the Ripper Doc to make money from however he could. Fingers reached out to his fixer Wakako, who suggested selling her body to scavs who made black market snuff brain dances. The scavs planned to kill her for content, but realized that it would be more profitable to keep her alive and make way more things using her advanced doll and brain dance cyberware. She was forced to endure countless horrific acts, only being found by V and Judy Alvarez long after. While her body recovered, her mind could not, and she would eventually take her life in Judy's apartment soon after her rescue. None of it would have happened if Wakako had not sold a still-living, breathing woman to the scavs, knowing what they would do to her. Melissa Rory in first trailer refers to the first ever Cyberpunk 2077 trailer from January 2013. In the trailer, we see a MaxTac team confronting a woman, Melissa Rory, having a cyberpsychotic episode and seem prepared to execute her, only for it to be revealed at the end of the trailer that she was recruited to become a MaxTac officer. This occurred on January 10th, 2077, when Melissa was likely driven into cyberpsychosis from her Higurashi 2013 Mantis Blade implants, which were discontinued in 2069 as they interfaced poorly with neural processors and sections of the prefrontal cortex, which led to her killing 14 people while seriously injuring 4 others. She is one of the very rare cases of MaxTac apprehending a cyberpsycho alive for reconditioning. After completing the side job Bullets, V can engage in combat with Lieutenant Melissa Rory and her squad by attacking them after leaving and re-entering the Jinguji store. In other scenes, we see that she thinks of her and V as very similar and will even attempt to recruit V to join MaxTac. Crystal Palace DLC is what many people believe to be the name of the second cancelled DLC. The Crystal Palace is easily the most famous space station in orbit around Earth and is the flagship of the European Space Agency. It's basically paradise for the 1% and has everything from casinos, restaurants, low-gravity pools, and luxury apartments to panoramic viewing rooms of Earth and outer space, concert venues, hotels, parks, and massive conference halls for the corpos. Supposedly, it was even confirmed by CD Projekt Red that this was going to be the focus of the DLC, and much like North Oak Casino, it is mentioned often throughout the story and world of Cyberpunk, to an extent that leads one to think they are deliberately guiding our attention there. Given the luxury resort and casino tie-ins, it would not be surprising if there were plans to show both locations, but that didn't end up happening. V's deepest desire is referring to events during the mission Automatic Love when V visits the dollhouse Clouds. The dolls there specialize in giving clients their deepest desires using high-end brain scanning technology to determine what those are. Based on what happened in V's session, her deepest desire was basically for someone to be emotionally intimate with, and for someone to tell her that they believed in her. Next, we have Keanu Reeves exists in universe. This is because Keanu Reeves' name is mentioned in the song No Save Point by Yankee and the Brave. Because of this, Keanu Reeves exists in universe as a minor actor who just happens to look a lot like Johnny Silverhand. Mr. Blue Eyes is Morgan Blackhand is a reference to what I would call a strange coincidence found in the depths of the Cyberpunk code. When you look at the game files, the hair model for Mr. Blue Eyes is labeled as Morgan Blackhand. As I said back in Tier 1, no one knows how Morgan Blackhand died, and no one knows who Mr. Blue Eyes is or where he comes from. It would also be supported by the theory that Morgan went to work for the government or some secretive agency. That said, there is literally nothing connecting the two characters other than the file name of a single hair model. But keep this in mind, because like many of the things we talked about so far, we're going to be coming back to this further down the iceberg. Blade Runner references can be found all over in the world of Cyberpunk, which I very much enjoy, as the 1982 Blade Runner is my favorite movie of all time. The most outspoken of these can be found at the Advocate Hotel. While the hotel offered more services in the past, by 2077 it is shut down and occupied by the Valentino gang. However, one of the elevators is still functional and will take V to the 42nd floor terrace. There, she can find an NPC labeled Unknown, holding a bird. This is an homage to the character Roy Batty, portrayed by Rutger Hauer in the original Blade Runner. Near here is a sign that says, "Like Tears," which is a reference to Roy's final speech toward the end of the movie. You can also find a niche for Roy in the columbarium, which reads, "All these moments will be lost in time, like tears in the rain." In the Where Is My Mind epilogue, V can take the Voight-Kampff test, which is a test in the Blade Runner world used to separate replicants from humans. There is also a reference in the columbarium to Sid Mead, Sid was a concept artist for Blade Runner, as well as things like Alien and Tron, and was called the artist who illustrates the future. And yeah, his work on neo-futurism is felt very strongly in Night City. The inscription on his niche calls him Creator of Worlds. Nocturne OP55N1 in Orbital Air refers to a pianist who can be seen playing Nocturne OP55N1 when V enters orbital air in the mission The Killing Moon. Childhood Hero System would have been a customization option in character creation that would allow players to change V's past in ways that would affect the story. While this was present in the demos, it was another feature that was removed before the game's final release. Rogue had a cut romance scene as a claim based on the presence of an unused game file called 2077 Rogue in Lingerie. The assumption is that Rogue Amendiaris would have had a romantic scene with Johnny or V if their relationship had been allowed to progress that far. Whether or not that was the plan, we will never know. And that is it for Tier 3 Dogtown. Now we move on to the hidden and difficult to find lore with Tier 4 Konpeki Plaza. This tier begins with Auto Translator in Pacifica. Auto Translator in Pacifica is a very nice detail added by the devs and shows the depth of the world of Cyberpunk. If V visits Pacifica before the Double Life mission, she won't be able to read translations of the Haitian Creole dialogue. However, once Judy installs the Auto Translator package while viewing Evelyn's braindance with Bridget, the Haitian Creole will be translated. Dogtown cyber junkies are secret bosses that can be found around Dogtown. They are addicts of a drug called Fant. The drug works like a brain dance and alters the user's perception of reality, making them think they are acting completely without consequence. Usually, this means becoming incredibly violent and slaughtering their way into the warehouses and alleys of Dogtown. River can die or go to jail refers to the fact that if V declines to assist River Ward in searching for Randy, she will receive a call from him during the end credits while he's in jail. River explains that he got into a fight after someone insulted Randy and asks if V can bail him out. On the other hand, if V initially agrees to help River but abandons him after reaching Edgewood Farm, she can return later to discover his body. Project Oracle is what V discovers on the encrypted chip in the Prophet's song when she goes to the Lizardmen meeting spot indicated by Gary the Prophet. After decoding the chip using Breach Protocol, the message says, "Phosphor radiates, occluding jaded eyes, come Titan, outward ring avian choruses, looping eternity. Cages of men melt as night descends, emerging Zalua, erect Cholula, under these expanses. Puppets lie awake, never sleeping." The first letters of each word forms the message, Project Oracle, command execute plans. The meaning of this message has never been deciphered, but it is almost certainly linked to the following abduction and death of Gary the Prophet. Robot Stripper Room is what I guess you would call an Easter egg found in room 202 of the Dewdrop Inn. It takes 20 strength to force the door open, and inside you will find two robots. One seated, holding what appears to be a robot beverage, and watching another robot perform a seductive dance. Not sure how all that works for robots, but I guess it's good they're enjoying themselves. Next we have Nightcore is behind the Peralez conspiracy. This ties into the entry Sandra Dorset's secret project, found a tier below. In short, Nightcore is developing personality-altering and replacement technology that closely mirrors what's happening to the Peralezes. Furthermore, based on Elizabeth's dialogue about Nightcore's prior attempt to financially back Jefferson, it would make sense that Nightcore is the mysterious entity manipulating the Peralezes. However, this theory conflicts with the idea that an AI is behind their control. V can meet Reed before Phantom Liberty is pretty literal. If she goes to Dino's club in downtown Night City, the club's bouncer is none other than FIA agent Solomon Reed. And it actually is him, because when you first meet him in the mission Lucretia, My Reflection, he mentions having previously worked in such a role. This is also backed up by the fact that when you scan him, his identity is registered as classified. T-Bug is alive is a theory that holds very little water. The idea is that T-Bug sold out her heist crew in order to get some sort of deal with Arasaka. This would mean that her entire death scene was faked and she slipped away into the night. While this doesn't make a lot of sense on the surface, it is further destabilized by the fact that the Damon vendor in Kabuki mentions that her corpse has been recovered. While a good story, it is almost certainly not accurate. Cut apartment decor refers to 3 items that were supposed to be added to V's apartment upon completion of specific missions, but never were. These were a record player with samurai vinyls after Tapeworm, an Aldecado's jacket after Queen of the Highway, and a poster of Carrie Uridine after Boat Drinks. While some of the other cut content I can live without, it does suck that we won't get to see these because they would have been some sick additions. The Atom Smasher detection debate is a point of contention among fans. While in the Arasaka penthouse in The Heist, Atom Smasher looks directly at V and Jackie in their hiding place, and many believe that he is aware of their presence. This can be further supported if V has enemy detection cyberware equipped, because he will light up like enemies do when they are aware of her presence. A counter to this is the assumption that this is a bug, resulting from Atom Smasher's status as a boss, and the game's UI viewing him as either part of a cutscene or perpetually aggroed. For me, there is an issue with both of these ideas. If he did see them, there is literally no reason not to obliterate them instantly. He definitely has no falter in his loyalty to the Arasakas. But on the other hand, he has the latest and most advanced combat implants at any given time. So how was it even possible for him to not have been aware of them? Honestly, I would just say that this was put there to scare the player, and he had no idea that they were there. But if you have any other ideas, drop in the comments, because I want to hear them. Delta V is a reference that could have a few different meanings. It is found on the straps of T-Bug's shoes in gold lettering that at first just look like some indistinct label or brand insignia. Generally, it's accepted that this is supposed to be a subliminal warning sign, since, in the Cyberpunk universe, Delta is slang for getting out or leaving, so it literally is telling V to get out of the heist. The Cyberpunk Wiki says that it also may be a reference to the Delta V jump boots from Doom Eternal, but I think the first one is far more likely. Original plans for the combat zone are unknown plans that CD Projekt Red may have had for the section of land located south of the W. Gibson Memorial Freeway. In the extended lore, the area was previously residential, but sometime in the 2020s faded into violence and crime to become a wasteland by 2077, where combat gangs fight one another and play something called Razor Ball. While there are references to it in the final game, there is no way to get to the combat zone. Whether or not this was meant to be PvP, combat practice, or just a burnout skeleton of a neighborhood will remain a mystery. The Frankfurt incident is what originally got V fired from Arasaka in the first place. There was a massive data leak at Arasaka's office in Frankfurt, Germany, that was assumedly related to their Sea of Clouds lunar base project. It was so severe that the European Space Council was debating whether or not they should revoke Arasaka's license to create lunar bases at all. Hearing this, Arthur Jenkins, Arasaka's head of counterintelligence for Night City, launches a cyber attack against the council, delaying the vote. The director of special operations, Susan Abernathy, calls to criticize Jenkins' tactic as too messy and says it will be costly to cover up. Jenkins, already brimming with hatred for Abernathy, then orders his most trusted soldier, V, to eliminate Abernathy by any means she sees fit, and gives her a data chip with a file on her personal life, including Susan's philandering, extortion, and numerous other incriminating data files. V goes to Lizzie's bar to contract Jackie Wells to carry out the job, but it looks like Susan already knew about it and sent some goons to make sure it wouldn't happen. Thankfully, this doesn't result in V's death, because the Mox and Valentinos keep the peace at Lizzie's and cause issues for the Arasaka security before that could happen. This is the grudge that Frank Nostra was banking on when he tried to trap V in the mission War Pigs that we discussed earlier. If you visit the Columbarium after the prologue, you will find a niche for Arthur Jenkins, with an epitaph reading, "Committed to the corporation, loyal until the very end." Judy's nudes refers to rumors from early in the game's life claiming that Judy Alvarez would send V nudes that could be found in V's apartments. While this is not true, the overall concept was, because following Update 1.5, V will receive nudes from Pan Am Palmer if she romances her. Next we have the Phantom Liberty translation scandal. On the day Phantom Liberty was released, a minor controversy arose involving the Ukrainian version of the game, which included anti-Russian content. In this version, terms like assholes were swapped with Rusnia, and there were references to the ongoing Russo-Ukrainian war, including graffiti with the Ukrainian coat of arms. CD Projekt Red responded saying the Ukrainian localization of Cyberpunk 2077 contains several remarks that could offend some Russian players. These remarks were not written by CD Projekt Red employees and do not represent our views. We are working to fix them and replace them in the next update. We apologize for this situation and are taking steps to ensure it does not happen again. In-game Suicides is about random fatalities all across Night City in which people fall to their deaths from megabuildings, assumedly by their own choice. Jago is transgender refers to Jago Zabo, the chief accountant of the Bagrest militia in Dogtown. Jago's bio has him being born sometime around 2042 in Budapest, Hungary under the name Jagado Zabo, a traditionally female name. His parents moved to Night City the same year he was born, and he would transition sometime afterward. Oza Bozo's IRL inspiration is another character reference, this time about Brazilian mercenary Oza Bozo. You probably remember him more accurately as the guy with a grenade for a nose, which he got because his brother tore his actual nose off with a pair of pliers. Ozab is patterned off of Brazilian celebrity and influencer Diev Pazos. Diev is most known for his YouTube channel called Hovum Nerd and his podcast called Nerdcast. But within the media umbrella of Hovum Nerd, there are many shows and series. Interestingly, Diev even voices Ozab in the Portuguese version of the game. Next we have David Bowie was originally going to play Johnny. In the original art for the tabletop game, Johnny Silverhand looks much more like David Bowie than anyone else, and CD Projekt Red had planned on him playing the role until his death in 2016. Even afterwards, there was talk about using a completely animated version of David Bowie to complete the character, but eventually it was given to Keanu Reeves. While I understand the idea behind the David Bowie style to Johnny, ultimately I think the leather-vested biker Keanu style is a much better fit. Scavs are anti-Russian stereotypes. The Scavs are portrayed as a pan-Slavic gang without being tied to a specific nation. However, they are culturally inspired and physically modeled after real-life post-Soviet criminals who ruled the Russian underworld in the 1990s. The brutal reputation of these groups, which still endures in infamy, heavily influenced the design, culture, and behavior of the scavengers in Cyberpunk 2077. Orbital Air Predator is one of the easiest to miss Easter eggs in the game and can be found atop the Orbital Air building. Amongst the trees there's a creature with glowing eyes and mantis blades that will run away if approached, leaving behind a dead body. Near the body, V can also find a shard labeled as Message to B. The scene and shard are an Easter egg to the 1987 film Predator, including the message found on the shard. Cut Johnny romance is another theory that appears to be more speculation than fact. After the game's release, some fans speculated that Johnny and V were intended to be more than just friends, or enemies depending on perspective, sharing a body. Elements like Johnny getting a Cupid heart tattoo with both their names, their connection being linked to the Lover's tarot card, and moments when V can question the nature of their relationship could be interpreted as romantic. However, the lack of substantial evidence and the logistical challenges of a V-Johnny romance suggest that this theory likely stems more from fans being down bad for Keanu rather than any plans by the developers. Arasaka Tower 3D game is a playable arcade game found in the abandoned church at Biotechnica Flats near the Protein Farm's fast travel point. It tells the story of Johnny Silverhand in 2023 solo assaulting Arasaka Tower and activating a nuclear bomb before escaping, almost the exact opposite of what actually happened that day. It is a very simple game, but also very complete, with 5 full levels, several Easter eggs, and an armor ammunition system. This is also connected to the FF06B5 mystery, but we will come back to that further down. FF06B5 leads to a dick is a supposed solution to one of the most difficult mysteries in Cyberpunk. It all hinges around a magenta dick spray painted on a North Oak wall and is backed up by 2 pieces of evidence. The first is that FF06B5 is the hex code for a specific shade of bright magenta in which color the dick is painted. The second is that during the mission Killing in the Name, Johnny says that this probably all leads to a picture of a cock. When at the scene of the graffiti, he will appear and call it symbolic. While this is unlikely that this is an actual solution to the 6-character code, it isn't completely impossible. Next we have Maelstrom is a cult. Maelstrom is not like any other gang in Night City, as they partake in gory rituals and apparently worship technology and cyberware. The Cyber Psycho mission Bloody Ritual is the best example of this. In an apparent attempt to integrate AI into a human host, Maelstrom conducted a ritual in Watson that went horribly wrong when the host turned cyber psycho. Additionally, it is revealed through a gig for Regina called Rite of Passage that in order to join Maelstrom, one has to remove their eyes and replace them with glowing red implants in another form of ritual. Leaked Phantom Liberty ending comes from Update 1.5 back in 2022, when data miners allegedly got hold of the script for the new ending that would be unlocked by Phantom Liberty. This ending had Songbird give V a latent cure that would activate at a later date, and this cure could only be activated by doing the Devil ending with Arasaka. Once fully cured, V would be presented with a choice to either return to Night City, where all her friends hate her for working with Arasaka, or to become head of Hanako's security and basically sell her soul. This turned out to be completely inaccurate when Phantom Liberty actually released. Myers is the villain of Phantom Liberty is less of a theory and more of just a way of looking at things. Although V rescues President Myers in the opening sequence of Phantom Liberty, it is ultimately Myers, not Kurt Hansen, who serves as the true antagonist of the expansion. Myers is responsible for pushing So-Mi to breach the Black Wall, leading to her fatal condition. She also violated multiple international laws regarding the Black Wall, setting off the chain of events in Phantom Liberty. In every ending of the expansion, Myers reveals her villainous nature, whether by launching a full-scale assault on orbital air that results in dozens of deaths in the Songbird route, or by being the person So-Mi would rather die than confront in the Reed route. Dogtown's population is a statistic that can be found through an FIA intel shard that is in the apartment of Elena Xenakis. According to the shard, the population of Dogtown is somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000 people. Next, we have Arasaka wants a fifth corporate war. During the mission On a Tight Leash, V finds out that Arasaka paid a group of Valentinos to dress as Militech soldiers and stage an attack on an Arasaka facility. When V talks about this with Sebastian Ibarra, he mentions that this sort of false flag operation is probably to provoke Militech into another conflict. This would not be surprising either, since Arasaka always seems to find a way to benefit from most conflicts. Netwatch doesn't suck is a pretty accurate statement, honestly. I mean, they aren't infallible by any means, but at the same time, they are definitely the best of the faceless capitalist entities ruling the year 2077. If for no other reason than that they maintain the Black Wall, one of the most valuable pieces of digital infrastructure in existence and the only thing keeping innumerable rogue AI creatures away from the technology people need to live their daily lives. Oppressive as they may be at times, Netwatch does not go around experimenting on human bodies and starting wars, and that is exactly how low the bar is. Original plans for the Flathead is about changes made to the character combat customization system. There were supposed to be 3 main builds that players could choose from, these being Solo, Netrunner, and Techie. Solo and Netrunner both made it to the final game, but sadly their sibling class never would. This was for a number of reasons, but chief among them was that there was just too much overlap between Netrunner and Techie that it would have been redundant to have both. This was not without overall loss though, because Techies would have primarily used the Militech MTO D12 Flathead drone that we get in the pickup mission in Act 1. While this would have been a very interesting addition to the game's mechanics, I can see how it would be one of the easy things to remove with a release date approaching that you can't keep pushing back. Cyberpunk version 0 is a version of the game only attainable on PS4 and Xbox One physical copies of the game from September of 2020. You must also never allow it to update, even with the Day 1 patch. If you manage to access version 0, then you will have quite a few interesting additions to your game, like traveling vendors, special delivery missions, more weapon silencers, and even an auto loot function, which would be really great. And none of these things are in the later builds of the game. You also won't be able to do anything, since version 0 of the game is all but unplayable, something you remember if you were one of us disappointed few that dark September weekend. 80-hour standard work week is the norm in 2077, for everyone. That's how much you work. That would be about 4,160 hours worked every year, and seeing as a year has 8,760 hours within it, many of which must be used to sleep and eat, this is much more akin to slavery than employment. More and more, it makes sense why so many people in 2077 choose to be criminals rather than working literally constantly. And that will bring us to the end of Tier 4 Konpeki Plaza. Now we really start to get into the depths of the cyberpunk world, just reaching up into Night City's oily, shadowy innards and pulling out the worst things we can find. As we begin Tier 5, Mikoshi. Tier 5 begins with 2013 prototype version. The 2013 prototype version was a pre-alpha build of Cyberpunk 2077 that leaked in June of 2021. In it, we see shirtless male V walking around an apartment in third-person mode and talking to a netrunner named Pat. We also see V's friend with benefits Sandra, who actually owns the apartment, and his neighbor, just named Neighbor. There is almost nothing similar between this and the final product, and it was probably a proof of concept made around the same time as the original trailer. While it is not a representative of the game itself, it does show the basic ideas of a futuristic world, a main character with connections to the underworld, shown by the conversation with Pat, social intrigue, shown by the revelation that Sarah is paying for the apartment with a widow fund that doesn't exist, and inescapable realistic annoyances like his neighbor dropping in unexpectedly. Victor's IRL inspiration is a theory that was ultimately disproved by CD Projekt Red. For a while, people thought Ripperdoc Victor Vector was inspired by a character from a Polish comedy show called The World According to the Kajpskis. In the show, there is a doctor character named Victor Vector, who is less than credible, and these similarities led fans to assume that this was another outside reference, like the surgeon being a reference to The Office. It was not, though, and CD Projekt later said that it was just a coincidence. Next, we have multiple Vs exist in universe. This entry was from before Update 2.0, when male and female V were given the same birth date. Basically, because female and male V had different birth dates in character creation when the game came out, they could be seen as two different people existing in Night City at the same time. Iron Man is an awesome reference to the Marvel Cinematic Universe that can be found in the Badlands. Amidst a pile of corpses in a cave, V can find a shard that is the journal of a Militech engineer named Thomas Starr. Thomas was kidnapped by a nomad gang called the Wraiths, who were going to keep him captive and force him to build weapons for them. He ends up building an exoskeleton with flamethrowers attached and fights his way out, Thomas Starr clearly being Night City's Tony Stark. The vocals in Never Looking Back are the biochip theme. Starting at 225 in the track Never Looking Back, the music is dominated by an incredible sounding vocal piece, which was also featured in the first teaser for Phantom Liberty. The melody of the vocals is actually a reworked version of the biochip theme, which is most prominently played during the tapeworm missions and on Misty's rooftop. Next is Barguest orchestrating gang wars. On a shard in Terra Cognita located in the shack where V undergoes the transformation into Aguilar Nubiola, the grim discovery of a mutilated woman found just outside Terra Cognita is detailed. After considerable speculation within the game's universe, security footage later confirms that the Barguest were responsible for the murder and mutilation. The group deliberately disposed of the body on scavenger territory, aiming to pin the crime on the Voodoo Boys. This move was designed to incite conflict between the two rival factions within Dogtown, sparking a war between them. Exactly what Arasaka is attempting to do with Militech. Yorinobu is a hero is a huge claim, and one that probably has you a little confused considering that he is an Arasaka. But if you look at it from a certain perspective, he did kill Saburo Arasaka, which eliminated a huge evil to all of mankind. His actions are generally honest, and if the ending sees him still in control of Arasaka, the company will leave Night City for good as he works on dismantling it from within. This rings especially true when you consider the personalities of his father and sister. On the scale of normal people, yes, Yorinobu is definitely not a great guy. But on the scale of soulless super corporation dynasty leaders, he could be a lot worse. If that bar sounds low, that's because it is. It really doesn't take much to be a more moral than average CEO. Now we come to very few know what V looks like. Due to her use of Kiroshi Optics cyberware, V's face is blurred on cameras, meaning that the only way to see her face is to meet her in person. This is one of the reasons that she's able to walk around Night City in relative safety despite being one of Arasaka's most wanted. Edgerunner's alt endings refers to two alternative endings for the Edgerunner anime that were revealed in a panel at the 2023 Paris Anime Convention. One ending would have Lucina Kushinada realize that she is pregnant with David Martinez's son once she realizes their shared dream of going to the moon. This was foregone for being too uplifting of an ending. The other would have seen David survive his battle with Atom Smasher and join Arasaka as a cybernetically enhanced soldier, not unlike Atom himself. This ending was scrapped because it was seen as too dark. Personally, I like the darker ending a lot since it's something akin to what we've seen before in the earliest Cyberpunk trailer with Melissa Rory being recruited to MaxTech. Cut Maiko's sex scene is talking about files titled things like maiko.sex.scene.femv and Maiko sex scene malev. From these, one can extrapolate that Maiko Maeda was going to reward V if she helped her with the Clouds takeover situation, something like we saw with Meredith Stout. Alex always dies. In some Phantom Liberty endings, Elena Xenakis gets executed by Kurt Hansen during Firestarter if V sides with Solomon Reed. In the ending where V sides with Songbird but gives her up to Reed, the only interaction V can have with Alex in any way is a postcard from her wedged in V's apartment door. In the ending where V sides with Songbird but Reed dies, V can speak to Alex at her bar and learn that she is assigned to kill V. But given that V is already weeks away from death, she essentially says screw it and leaves. However, given the NUSA track record of how they treat their agents, sacrificing Reed to Arasaka, abandoning Alex in Dogtown, abusing So-Mi, and the fiasco Alex was directly involved in, an attempt on Myers' life, massive national security breach, the attack on Orbital Air, and all of the issues with V, it's far more likely than not that the NUSA simply got rid of her as a loose end, and just said she was in Monaco. Next we have Pistis Sophia True Meaning. If you remember, the hotel in which Johnny gives his dog tags to V and tells her that he is prepared to sacrifice himself is called the Pistis Sophia. This is in reference to the real-life book called Pistis Sophia from the 3rd or 4th century, which tells an allegory of the soul, personified by the character Sophia, or wisdom. Sophia has fallen from grace and seeks redemption so that she may return to heavenly realms. The book shows us complex dialogues based on Christian ideology, in which Jesus tells his followers about the cosmic order of the universe, details about ancient divine entities, and a lot of other esoteric stuff. The story is ultimately about overcoming ignorance and suffering to rise above the darkness of chaos and ascend into the light. I don't need to tell you all the ways in which this relates to the world of Night City, but a few of the most direct ones are Johnny deserting the military to become a sort of rock messiah himself, and V struggling to overcome the criminal underbelly she must navigate while resisting the temptation to let go and fade away as her mind is taken over by the relic of a dead man. Now it's time to ground ourselves a little bit and talk about Atom Smasher Fucks. See, on her 18th birthday, Michiko Arasaka, the granddaughter of Patriarch Saburo Arasaka, only wanted one thing. She wanted to get absolutely wrecked by the Night City boogeyman himself, Atom Smasher. And in case you were wondering, yes, we are still talking about this guy right here. I mean, different folks, different strokes, but I think it would be kinda tough as Saburo knowing that your son's personal bodyguard had his metal mitts all over your granddaughter. It would make me a little uncomfy, but I guess things are different at God-tier CEO status. Let's shake that off with Origin of the Valentinos. Back in the glory days of the 2020s, the Valentinos were just a bunch of guys who said they were in a gang to pick up women, but they quickly discovered the very thin line between a bunch of guys saying they were in a gang and an actual gang. The Valentinos are deeply rooted in Chicano culture, and while they are still incredibly violent, they tend to have more of a philosophy and structure to their beliefs than many of the gangs in Night City. Johnny's theme is based on a riff from Kashmir, is a claim based on the similarity between official OST song The Rebel Path and Led Zeppelin's Kashmir. There is also a samurai song called The Ballad of Buck Ravers, which has a very similar riff. And while these may just be coincidences brought about by genre and instrumental similarities, I don't think so. Cyberpunk as a whole is fraught with song references of every type, so I would say that this is definitely intentional. Next we have Neural Matrix Usage. In Phantom Liberty, President Myers' right-hand woman, a netrunner named Song So-Mi, or Songbird, tells V that the Neural Matrix AI tool can only be used once, and that it was used on her when she was under the effects of her own cybermental issues. However, in the mission 407, Solomon Reed tells V that the Neural Matrix did not work on Songbird, and so it is being saved to be used on V. Because of this contradiction, it means that either the FIA didn't bother saving Songbird with the Matrix, or they saved V with conventional methods and surgery. A third option would be that Songbird lied to V about the Matrix, but that just wouldn't fit with her character's behavior overall. The tarot cards are a fourth wall break. This is a theory that's mostly open to interpretation. The tarot cards found throughout the game are definitely linked to the characters and events of the story as it unfolds, with Johnny being the magician, V being the fool, and Hanako Arasaka being the high priestess, just to name a few. Misty makes the comment that they are signs from a higher power, and it's unknown if that higher power is CD Projekt Red, talking directly to the player, hence the fourth wall break component, or if it's just referring to an in-game higher power that we are unaware of. Following that up, we have another spiritually oriented theory in Jackie didn't avoid red. In Act 1, when V is at the Esoterica during the mission The Ripper Dock, Misty tells Jackie to avoid the color red. This seems meaningless for a while until the heist mission, which ultimately leads to Jackie's death. Over the course of this mission in Konpeki Plaza, the color red is almost inescapable. Red lighting, red floors and ceilings, and red can even be found in the wood floor inlays in Yorinobu's penthouse. If only he had listened to Misty, maybe things would have been different. Alright, now it's time to make good on the promise I have been repeating every level of the Iceberg thus far. It's time to talk about the full FF06B5 mystery. This whole thing is pretty convoluted and filled with red herrings, so I'm going to be doing a lot of summarizing. If you made it this far in the video, then you are probably interested in Cyberpunk to an abnormal degree, much like me, and if that's the case and you want to learn more about the complete FF06B5 mystery, then check out Sam Bram on YouTube. His videos are the source for most of this information. Before we get to the findings of this continuing investigation, we need to look at two things that you need to know about in order to get the full picture. The first is Ouroboros. Ouroboros is the serpent or dragon often depicted eating its own tail. While first found in ancient Egyptian iconography, it later played a part in many mythologies including Norse, which is where you have probably seen it before. Well, it's also in The Witcher and was the source for a lot of codes that users put together in pursuit of FF06B5. There were a lot of 1000 IQ things done to extrapolate these codes, which you can find out more about in those YouTube videos I mentioned. The other thing you should know about is Polyhister. This is a guy who is on the same track that you are and is in search of the meaning behind FF06B5 as well. In fact, that place you break into to find the Arasaka Tower 3D arcade cabinet belongs to Polyhister. He seems to be a pretty chill guy who's just trying to unravel the mysteries of his world. So now let's look at the entire FF06B5 story so far. Like we talked about earlier, the 6-digit hex code of FF06B5 is magenta, the same color in which we find a dick painted on a wall. Outside of that, there are the codes found from the Witcher's Ouroboros puzzle, the secrets hidden in the Arasaka Tower 3D game, Polyhister's research area in the Biotechnica Flats protein farms, a secret cutscene triggered by going AFK over a mattress in the middle of nowhere, secret QR codes that can only be seen while dreaming on that mattress, the statues all over the city, and finally, Polyhister's notes that can be found on his computer when V wakes up from those dreams. She will also find Polyhister's clothes that were left behind after he took the Obi-Wan Kenobi way out. From his notes, you can see that he discovered someone or something watching over the city in secret, a controlling power moving in the dark, and everyone who gets too close to figuring it all out disappears. The thing that goes most of the way towards solving the mystery, at least as much as we will probably get in the current game, is the message that appears after scanning the QR code seen in V's dream on the discarded mattress. The message says, "You've been looking long enough. You can stop now, it's over." Or is it? No, really it is. One thing ends, another begins. Except nothing's beginning or ending. That's just your gonk mammal brain trying to make sense of your world. To create order. To control. To try to delay the inevitable realization that you're nothing. We're nothing. Mathematics, physics, chemistry, in the grand scheme of things, nothing but tools to acquire power. Hardly more advanced than the first rock we grabbed to bash each other's skulls. Isn't that liberating? You're welcome. Go. Be free. Frolic like the over-evolved primates you are. And for all you seekers and fools finding patterns where there are none, creating order out of chaos, here's a little secret for you. This isn't the first time we've met, and it won't be the last. But for now, you can rest easy. Celebrate your adorable little achievement by cracking open a brosif and marveling at being the only creatures on this planet with opposable thumbs. Just don't read too deep into it. In the grand scheme of things, you get the gist. Catch you around, Chumbata. I think that gives enough information to technically be called closure, but it still doesn't explain much. As of right now, though, it is as much of an ending as anyone has been able to find. If the full solution of FF06B5 is ever found, whether in Cyberpunk 2077 or whatever Project Orion will turn out to be, it is probably the key to connecting a lot of the mysteries throughout Night City, like Mr. Blue Eyes, the Zen Master, whoever took Gary the Prophet, and maybe even more. 2137 code meaning refers to the code for a numeric pad found in the mission Greed Never Pays. While it may seem like a random combination, the number is actually a reference to a Polish meme. More specifically, 2137 refers to the hour that Pope John Paul II died. Next we have Dex would betray V no matter what, which is just accurate, to be honest. Everyone in on the heist was completely out of their depth, including Dexter Deshawn. Evelyn had thrown together a hasty plan, relying on a low-grade fixer who buckled under pressure and a team of rookie mercs. The chances of the heist succeeding were 0, but if by some miracle it did, Dexter would still have stuck to his motto, "Can't risk it, V," and bailed to avoid the aftermath. T-Bug was hit with Soul Killer. Netrunners are one of the Soul Killer's main targets, as Arasaka needs to capture and repurpose their skills. T-Bug, a hostile netrunner, had infiltrated an Arasaka-owned hotel just as Saburo Arasaka was killed. It would be almost impossible to remain undetected. Given the circumstances and the details surrounding her death, it's likely that Arasaka used Soul Killer on T-Bug through the net, both to eliminate her and to interrogate her later via Ingram. All romance options were originally bi. The voice actors for V, Gavin Drea and Charami Lee, revealed that they each recorded the voice lines for all 4 romances in the game. Meaning for the voices of a male V and Judean River romance exist, as well as female V and Carrie and Panam. It is worth noting that this has been contested more recently, with some people refuting those claims. Rogue AIs control the game's plot. The looming threat of rogue AIs beyond the Blackwall has been steadily building throughout the main game and Phantom Liberty. These AIs' power and danger are showcased in plot lines like those involving the Voodoo Boys and Songbird. But one theory takes this further, suggesting that rogue AIs have been orchestrating events, subtly influencing characters to make choices that could facilitate a Blackwall breach. The most obvious instance of this control is Songbird, who is directly manipulated by rogue AIs toward the end of the expansion. More subtle examples might include influencing the Voodoo Boys to ensure V crosses beyond the Blackwall, or the brainwashing of the Peralezes. Honestly, this may even tie into FF06B5 in the future, though it is slightly unlikely. Next is Sandra Dorsett's secret project. Sandra Dorsett, a netrunner for Night Corps, is rescued by V and Jackie during the game's opening. Later, Sandra contacts V, asking her to retrieve her personal data bank from a group of scavs in Kabuki. If V decrypts it, she will uncover that Sandra had discovered that Night Corps was testing AIs on living human subjects, experiments that ended horrifically for the participants. Additionally, 3 shards scattered throughout her apartment, labeled entry 36, 37, and 38, reveal her hacking into Night Corps' secure files on further experiments and her growing paranoia. In the mission Black Steel in the Hour of Chaos, V can enlist Sandra's help to ambush a MaxTac convoy. She agrees, but only if V uploads a small demon to a MaxTac officer, allowing her a backdoor for future use. Johnny and V's cut hug refers to official behind-the-scenes footage of one of Keanu's motion capture sessions, showing him recording a scene where he pulls someone into a hug. However, this hug didn't make it into the game, sparking widespread speculation that it was meant to be shared between V and Johnny if V chose to give Johnny her body. Personally, I don't think this is that likely. I would probably say it was for a flashback scene or something like that, but still, the possibility remains. Children of Men is another outside reference, if a much darker one than we have seen before. On a beach near the Grand Imperial Mall in Pacifica, a dead body lies washed up on the shore. A lootable shard identifies him as Thero Faran, who was transporting a woman and her child out of Night City for a group called the Human Project. Ensuring the child's safety is the project's top priority, as Arasaka has some sort of malicious though nondescript plan for her. Though Theo successfully gets them to safety, he is fatally injured and dies on the beach. This scene references the 2006 film Children of Men, in which a man named Theo escorts a woman and her child out of a dystopian United Kingdom. Next is New Zealand. Oddly enough, in 2077, New Zealand has avoided many of the dystopian pitfalls that the rest of the world is suffering from and is now a sort of haven of a better way of life. Especially compared to places like Night City, it would be a pretty good step up. Getting slightly darker, we have the contacts in Arizona are the Technomancers. The Technomancers are a group of nomads specializing in technology, motivated by a drive to advance their tech, recover lost knowledge, and solve complex problems. Politically neutral, they collaborate with various corporations and aren't affiliated with any of the 7 major nomad nations. Shrouded in mystery and highly secretive, the Technomancers are open to offering their expertise, just driving a pretty hard bargain most of the time. If V decides to leave Night City with the Aldecados in the Star ending, Pan Am mentions that they'll do everything possible to save V from her 6-month death sentence, including reaching out to mysterious contacts in Arizona. Given V's condition and the Technomancer's specialized services, many speculate that Pan Am and V may have been seeking help from them. Rogue and Carrie were friends refers to Rogue Amendiaris and Carrie Uridine. During the Sun ending, V can see a picture of Rogue and Carrie together on Rogue's desk from 2023. While they do not mention each other at all, it would make sense that they were at least acquaintances, having both been major figures in Night City around the same time and knowing many of the same people. Ryan's murder is one of the deepest cutting theories that we have looked at thus far. In the main job, The Heist, V witnesses a meeting between Arasaka agents, Night City Mayor Lucius Ryan and his deputy Weldon Holt, while piloting the Flathead through Konpeki Plaza's air ducts. This scene underscores the close connection between Arasaka and the 2 politicians, who seem to be renegotiating their deal just before the election, suggesting they'd reached some sort of agreement. Shortly after, Ryan dies under suspicious circumstances in an unlicensed braindance den. Although the source of the spiked brain dance could be unclear on its own, the context of other political plots ties things together. Jefferson Peralez, Ryan's opponent in the mayoral race, is likely not backed by Arasaka. Instead, Jefferson and his wife appear to be undergoing digital brainwashing, almost certainly by Nightcore. Nightcore controls most of Night City's services, including the NCPD and MaxTac. Jefferson, an advocate for Night City joining the NUSA, seems to be under their influence through Nightcore's manipulation. Essentially, Ryan had been leading the election before his death. After he passed, Holt took up the campaign but was ultimately defeated by Jefferson. Now, an NUSA-backed figure is in Night City's mayoral office, a position that previously aligned with Arasaka's interests. Konpeki Plaza BD implications is definitely one of the more sus entries on the Berg. According to how Braindance software affects the user, it means V fully felt what Evelyn was feeling when she was watching her recording of the interaction with Yorinobu, both mentally and physically, if you get what I'm saying. There is nothing I can really find to back this up, but, well, Thrifty Geo thought it was important enough to be the last thing on Tier 5, so here we are. And that will bring us to the end of Tier 5, Konpeki Plaza. Next, it is time for the 6th and final tier of the Cyberpunk 2077 Iceberg, Cynosure Bunker, where we find the darkest, most disturbing, and most complex knowledge of the cyberpunk world. We start Tier 6 with T-Bug's logo in the Cynosure Bunker. This is a topic of some debate. Some people think the images seen on some of the screens in the Cynosure Bunker is T-Bug's logo. Others say that it's just a reused asset. While the latter may be true, I really don't see CD Projekt reusing a Netrunner's insignia in a top-secret government bunker that worked on a project directly relating to netrunning. If it is a coincidence, it's a weird one. If it's not a coincidence, then either she was a part of the program back in the 2010s, or she was a part of the group that tried resurrecting it in the 2060s and 70s. I think the second of those would make much more sense, though I wish it was something that would have been more expanded upon in her part of the story. Arasaka chooses not to fully cure you, theorizes that Arasaka knows how to fully cure V of the relic, but chooses not to so that they can continue to study her, gathering data in order to more fully resurrect Saburo Arasaka. It would make more sense than them just not knowing how to fully cure her at all. I mean, the NUSA knows how, so the people who created the relic in the first place certainly should. The overall idea isn't impossible though, especially considering the moral bankruptcy of Hanako. Next is alt-absorbed Saburo's Ingram. If we assume that Saburo Arasaka's Ingram was stored with Arasaka's very important data, then it would have been in their literal and digital fortress Mikoshi, which Alt later attacked, absorbing the Ingrams within. This means that the final remnants of Saburo Arasaka's mind were absorbed into Alt Cunningham. The NUSA sabotaged V. This doesn't suggest that the NUSA intentionally sabotaged V's cyberware to eliminate her as a threat, because they could have just killed her if that were the goal. Instead, the NUSA has hindered V just enough to make themselves her only viable option moving forward, setting V up to be a valuable asset. The first indication that something is amiss comes from the conflicting explanations about why V can't use cybernetics. Solomon Reed claims that any substantial cybernetic implants could overload her brain and kill her. However, when Victor performs a detailed scan, he observes that it's almost as if your brain has turned deaf to implant signals, which directly contradicts Reed's warning. On top of this, V's sudden 2-year coma is vaguely explained as, "The damage was worse than we thought," but no concrete reason is really offered. The coma also leaves V's previous connections and friendships scattered or fundamentally changed, severing ties to her former life and leaving her with little left to lose. The NUSA's motive for sabotaging V is straightforward. She is an immensely powerful individual who could be a valuable asset. V single-handedly rescued the president from a hostile combat zone and, depending on the chosen ending, managed to take down either a MaxTac convoy or an elite NUSA strike team. It's clear that V is an exceptionally skilled mercenary, exactly the type of person the NUSA would want on their side. By isolating V from her contacts during the coma and stripping away her ability to operate as a merc, the NUSA has set up an ideal situation. They can easily reach out and say, "We might be able to restore your cyberware, but you'll have to do something for us first." In severing V's old life and hinting at the possibility of restoring it, the NUSA not only gains a powerful operative, but also ensures V's loyalty with the promise of reclaiming what she lost. Given the NUSA's treatment of others, such as Songbird, exploiting her, tearing her from her old life, and repeatedly pushing her to breach the Blackwall, Alex misleading her for 7 years and using her purely as a tool, and Reed betraying him, leaving him stranded in Night City, demoting him and treating him as expendable, it's easy to believe that they wouldn't hesitate to manipulate V into working for them. Next, we have Biotechnica can cure V. In the 2020s, Biotechnica successfully created the first human clone capable of functioning as a fully realized individual. This process involved implanting an AI into a human body. However, without the means to generate Ingrams to inhabit these bodies, Biotechnica couldn't advance much farther. Fast forward to 2077, and Arasaka faces the opposite challenge. They've mastered creating reliable Ingrams through Soulkiller, but implanting those Ingrams into bodies remains complex, as a body must be a close match to the Ingram, as seen with V and Saburo. Biotechnica's solution for V could involve creating a clone of V, based on her DNA, for V's Ingram to then inhabit. While it's a complex and challenging process, Biotechnica does have a feasible path to saving V. Following that up, we have a pretty deep cut. Songbird breached into Mikoshi. The deep-rooted animosity between the NUSA and Militech and Arasaka is a defining element of the Cyberpunk 2077 world, with each faction eager to see the other dismantled to achieve its own objectives. Prior to the data crash, the NUSA and Militech developed Project Cynosure as a countermeasure to Soulkiller, focusing on creating and controlling dangerous AIs. Although the original Cynosure program was shut down in 2017, Militech's hostility toward Arasaka only intensified, culminating in the Fourth Corporate War. This conflict reached its peak when a Militech strike team, Johnny Silverhand among them, nuked Arasaka Tower to destroy its Soulkiller systems and Ingram processing facilities. About 50 years later, when Songbird was recruited by the NUSA as an intelligence specialist, Militech remained interested in Cynosure's potential. They revived the project in 2068, this time to explore using rogue AIs beyond the Blackwall. At the same time, the NUSA had Songbird probing the Blackwall at Myers' request. Here's where the theory takes shape. It's likely that Militech and the NUSA, aware of Mikoshi's existence and Arasaka's history with Soulkiller, would have at least attempted to investigate the data fortress. Who better for such a task than their best netrunner, Songbird? One mystery in Phantom Liberty is the identity of the AI harming Songbird. This theory suggests that upon accessing Mikoshi, one or more Ingrams may have escaped, akin to Alt's escape from Arasaka in 2013. Freed from the data fort, these Ingrams could have evolved into a more advanced and hostile AI beyond the Blackwall. With knowledge of Songbird's unique abilities, the AI would manipulate her to achieve its own goals, setting off the events in Phantom Liberty. Next, we have a mystery hidden in dim and dirty rooms all across Night City. I Am Not Me rooms. Throughout Night City, V encounters disturbing rooms with the ominous phrase "I am not me" scrawled on the walls in what seems to be dried blood. One of these rooms is found in the apartment complex where Takemura and Hanako hide out during Search and Destroy. V can glimpse this chilling scene through a crack in a door. Another is discovered during the mission Cuckoo's Nest, where V rescues Jasmine Dixon from an asylum. The words are written in the cell next to hers. A third major I Am Not Me room is located in a decaying shack in Rocky Ridge. Alongside the phrase, the shack is covered in crude drawings: a child with blacked out eyes, a face with gouged features, and a scarecrow with a crossed out face. The phrase appears in a few other unsettling locations, including the Scav hideout where Evelyn was tortured, although these are among the most notable. Like a lot of the unexplained oddities in Night City, these messages seem to hint at a hidden force of some sort, working in the darkness beneath the average citizen. This brings us to V is an AI. In an ending where V is reinserted into her body after reaching Mikoshi, the original V dies. What remains is just a digital copy of V's psyche, meaning any soul or spirit V once had is gone, in most understandings of the idea, just like Johnny. The post-Mikoshi V is essentially a fractured copy of her consciousness, transformed into an AI and placed into a human body. This version of V, although carrying the same memories and personality traits, is a constructed self, fundamentally different from the original, fully human V. Next, we have Militech's Nomad Genocide. Throughout the Badlands, V can come across scenes of brutal nomad massacres, all carried out by Militech. Despite the Badlands being largely lawless, Militech is tasked with keeping the peace there. Though shards found at massacre sites reveal that many Militech soldiers kill nomads just for sport. This disregard is compounded by the disdain toward nomads in Night City itself, with news outlets like N54 News often portraying them as subhuman, treating them more like pests than people. The sentiment extends globally, with some countries attempting to purge their nomad populations by erecting border walls and outright banning their entry, particularly across South and Central America. Now we have what is definitely one of the more eerie facts. Johnny isn't buried in the oil fields. Black Dog is a story in Cyberpunk Red that follows a team of mercenaries tasked with transporting a body from Night City to Los Alamos, sometime in the late 2030s or early 2040s. It's heavily implied that the body they're moving is Johnny Silverhand's, and they're delivering it to a character named Angel, who is hinted to be a clone of Alt Cunningham. In return for their work, the mercs are given a lost samurai track called Black Dog. Since Johnny's memories of his death are distorted and he was neither captured by Arasaka nor interrogated by Saburo, the chain of custody of his body remains murky. The most likely sequence of events suggests that Johnny's body may have first passed into the hands of a devoted samurai superfan named Samantha, before eventually reaching Angel, who greets the body by saying, "Hello, my love." What I find most disturbing about this entire thing is that not only are they transporting a corpse, it is a heavily decomposed corpse by this point, since Johnny would have died almost over a decade earlier, depending on when Black Dog takes place. Next is Johnny's blood type is symbolic of his character. On his dog tags, we see that Johnny Silverhand's blood type is O negative. O negatives are also called universal donors because they can give blood to anyone. By that same token, they can only receive blood from another O negative. Johnny can be almost anyone and do almost anything. He can build a rebellion from almost anything, and even without his body, will find a way to fight against the corpos. That said, his arrogance does not allow him to receive life and support from most people. While there are people who care about him, he often is unkind and thoughtless to them, instead focusing always on whatever war he's fighting. His evolution with V is probably one of the first times that he has ever had a relationship in which he really considers what someone else wants, because he has to. Johnny can give life through his violence, but that same violence leaves him alone, unable to receive life from others, and ultimately pushing him to his final sacrifice on Arasaka Tower. Now it's time to talk about the underlying mystery beneath so much of the iceberg to this point. It's time for the grand unified Mr. Blue Eyes conspiracy. I have done a lot of reading and a lot of watching about Mr. Blue Eyes in preparation for this section, and I think I've narrowed it down to 3 possibilities. Number 1 is that he is just a random AI walking around in an android body and is one of many like him, somewhat supporting Gary the Prophet's message about the Alpha Centauri. I don't think this is true. I think Mr. Blue Eyes is almost certainly one of the other 2 options that I will present, but we should include the possibility that he is someone completely random. Number 2 is Morgan Blackhand. See, I said he would come back around at some point, and here we are. Morgan disappeared after the Arasaka Tower bombing, and no one knows if he's alive or dead. Mike Ponsmith confirmed that Morgan was alive in 2045, and I really don't see Mike sacrificing one of his favorite characters, so it's reasonable that he's still out in the world somewhere. But even if Morgan Blackhand is still alive, there isn't much connecting him and Mr. Blue Eyes other than that one hair model, right? Well, sort of. See, players found the character model for Morgan Blackhand in the game's files. 2 of them, actually, one for 2023 and one for 2027. So the original plan seems to have been including him in flashbacks and the continuing story, but this was not done due to Mike's reluctance. Someone did manage to get these character models to load into their game though, and the one for 2023 just looked like a random character, but the one for 2027, I'm not insane, right? That just is Mr. Blue Eyes. Maybe. It could be that when CD Projekt Red got the no-go on the inclusion of Morgan in the game, they didn't want his character model to go to waste, being pretty tight on time as they were, and just decided to change up some of the textures and make him Mr. Blue Eyes. That would explain why Mr. Blue Eyes' hair is named Morgan Blackhand. It was the only piece of the character model that they didn't alter from its original state, just copied and pasted it over. But this seems like a weird thing to do though, especially since one is a character whose secret identity is a pretty big deal throughout the story, and the other has been famously missing for years. Whether this is a choice by the developers or a coincidence of the development process is what will ultimately decide if this Morgan Blackhand theory holds any water. Finally, we have number 3, Richard Knight. So for this one, we gotta go back to when Richard Knight decided to start Night City. He was concerned about the impending societal collapse that would befall humanity and wanted to build a place beyond the crime, violence, and suffering of daily life. I won't go through every detail of his life, but basically he started Knight International, started pitching the idea of a city governed by corporations, and bought some cheap land. The land was the site of some horrible nondescript massacre and housed a ghost town called Morro Bay. It was here he began construction of his utopia called Coronado City. In the construction of Coronado City, Richard brushed off a non-inconsiderable amount of local unions and building companies who were run by the West Coast mob. While he still had to use some of their services, it was all done while preaching his gospel of a crime-free city. On September 20th, 1998, he was shot and killed in his penthouse suite at the top of the newly constructed Parkview Tower. Knight's killer was never apprehended, and in his memory, the newly appointed city council officially renamed Coronado City as Night City in his honor. So now we know Richard Knight, let me draw some of the connections. First of all, Knight Corps, run by Richard's wife, Miriam, after his demise, is a major controller of city politics as far back as record exists. Look no further than Jefferson and Elizabeth Perales. Jefferson grew up in poverty but was able to study law at Asukaga Berkeley University on a full-ride scholarship from Knight Corps. That was where he met Elizabeth, who was also there on a full-ride scholarship from Knight Corps. His whole life has been shaped to be the mayor of Night City, and we can infer that the Maelstrom and SSI surveillance of the Peralez apartment was also organized by Nightcore. This would explain Mr. Blue Eye's presence at the end of Dream On. If you wanted to be a full believer in the Richard Knight camp, then you could even say, as many do, that he is inhabiting Morgan Blackhand's body through an Ingram, explaining their similarities. But herein lies my issue with this theory. Richard Knight died in 1998, and the Ingram was discovered by Alt Cunningham's Soul Killer project in the late 2000s and early 2010s, with it only reaching any level of value in 2013, when Alt was abducted by Arasaka. My point here is that Richard Knight would not have had access to Ingram technology during his lifetime, since it wasn't even invented yet. There's a technical possibility that maybe he had some very primordial form of it with a backup of his personality, but the chances are incredibly low. A secondary theory is that even if it isn't Richard literally, it could be an AI synthesization of his personality used by Nightcore. We do know that Nightcore is almost certainly who sent the nameless corpos to that meeting with Maelstrom that Gary the Prophet tipped V off to. In the meeting, they talk about vampires, and putting this together with Gary's correct theory that Saburo Arasaka was not dead, and instead looming somewhere within the depths of the Arasaka family crypt, we can assume that they knew he was still alive, and were preparing for how that would affect Night City politics and their newly elected Mayor Peralez. Whether Mr. Blue Eyes is Morgan Blackhand, Richard Knight in Morgan Blackhand's body, or actually an alien from Alpha Centauri, is ultimately up to the player to decide, or more information to reveal. Maybe he's connected to FF06B5, and maybe not. But this is as much of a solution to the mystery as we will probably ever get. There is one last thing that could support the Richard Knight side of this theory, though. Something Gary the Prophet told his followers before his abduction. And lo, they shall descend upon the earth unseen, the sky shrouded in darkness. Night is coming, the eternal night. With that, we will finish off Tier 6, and with it, the Cyberpunk 2077 Iceberg created by ThriftyGeo69. I will leave links to the channels that contributed to the creation of this video in the description, and let me know if I got information wrong or missed some obvious solution to one of the mysteries discussed. If you have any future video suggestions, feel free to join the Discord and subscribe here so you don't miss it. Until then, that's all I've got for you. Bye.